Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our COVID-19 pandemic travel insurance plans and best practices webinar. As you know, my name is Bryn and I'm the employee benefits specialist here at Maximus Rose. And this morning I'm joined by Jonathan from Manulife. Jonathan is an internal wholesaler for the GTA affinity market. Thanks, Jonathan, for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Bryn.
Of course, of course. All right. So let's get started. The agenda today, we'll do an insurance overview, a travel insurance overview. We'll also look at the COVID-19 global travel advisory issued by the Government of Canada. We'll look at travel coverage through employee benefits and look into some of the important considerations, the fine print of travel insurance policies, those infamous clauses that are always included in the policy. We'll also hand it over to Jonathan, who will be speaking to us about Manulife's COVID-19 pandemic travel insurance plan. And he'll also speak to us about credit card travel insurance because we often have questions about what coverage is available through credit cards. And then we'll finish off with a Q&A session. Important note that this presentation is not is not intended to encourage non-essential travel. Neither Manulife nor Maximus Rose is encouraging non-essential travel, but rather we're just presenting information about what options are available and what considerations to take into account. So looking at out-of-country travel right now during the pandemic, if you go to the Government of Canada's travel advisory website, right on the landing page is this big red box that says official global travel advisories. So there's an advisory to avoid non-essential travel outside of Canada until further notice, so there's no end date, and also avoiding all cruise ship travel outside of Canada. So Canadians are, of course, free to travel to countries that have open borders, including the US, which, despite having a closed land border at the moment, is allowing Canadians to fly into the country. But it's not advised at this time, and there's a couple of reasons why travel isn't advised right now. One of them is that if you're going into another country, there's no guarantee that there's going to be medical space available for you in hospitals or clinics right now. There's always a preference for giving space to residents. And there's also, if we remember back in March or April, what happened with Canadians who were in Peru. Peru chose to close their borders to international travel, and a lot of Canadians felt as if they were stranded in Peru. And the government had to organize this plane to return Canadians and repatriate Canadians. And under this global travel advisory, there's no guarantee that something like a repatriation is available. So it's your responsibility to check the Government of Canada's travel advisory website. And Jonathan is going to speak about that COVID-19 specific coverage a little bit later, so we'll get some more information on that. But specifically, just briefly looking at what travel insurance is. Travel insurance provides financial protection for unforeseen medical emergencies, accidents, or illnesses. A lot of travelers have more than one plan, so you're often covered under your own employee benefits plan. Then you may have coverage through your spouse. You may have credit card insurance coverage, or you may have chosen to purchase an individual plan. But there are a few things that are very specific to travel insurance that would control or contribute to a comprehensive plan. And that's, of course, the out-of-country emergency medical coverage being the most important. That's going to cover those unforeseen medical expenses. Trip cancellation and trip interruption, which right now at the moment is kind of in limbo for a lot of insurers. The loss or theft of baggage and valuables coverage, which is fantastic because we've all traveled and either lost our baggage or experienced a type of theft or a close encounter. And 24-hour access to a representative that speaks your language, ideally. So looking specifically at trip cancellation, so since March 13th, many Canadians are not eligible for trip cancellation and trip interruption coverage due to COVID-19 specifically. If you choose to book a trip after this travel advisory, which is still in effect, or if you purchase trip cancellation and trip interruption insurance right now, you may not actually have that coverage if it's due to COVID-19 and there's unexpected expenses that may arise, causing you to have your trip interrupted or extended, etc. So it's very specific, very important that you understand your specific policy that you've purchased. Going into COVID-19 and employee benefits coverage specifically. So travel insurance is a great feature of your employee benefits plan, but it's really, really important that you understand the fine print of your policy. The type of coverage varies by the carrier. We have a collection of people here with many different carriers. So every carrier has their own specificity and own rules of how they're dealing with this COVID-19. So if you do want an update of how your carrier is responding to COVID-19 and travel, feel free to email me. I'll definitely send you an update. I have them for all of the carriers. But when the advisory was first issued in March, a lot of insurers had actually stopped coverage for COVID-19 related medical emergencies abroad. And now several insurers have resumed offering coverage for COVID-19 expenses along with or on top of regular travel insurance plans. But not all contracts have the same policy wording, so it's very important that you understand what's specific to your policy. Because often eligibility is based on if there is that government travel advisory to a region or not, which is why a lot of travel insurance does not cover travel to a country that's in the middle of a war or there's an issue happening internally, so your coverage is often not extended to go into those places. Similar to COVID-19, COVID-19 is no longer an unforeseen emergency situation. It's foreseen and forewarned, so if you get sick to COVID-19, some carriers are not covering through medical employee benefits. But on the flip side, if you are abroad and you fall, you may be covered because this was an unforeseen accident. It was not due to COVID-19. So again, you have to look at what is the contractual definition of an emergency in your policy, write down exactly what is covered and which circumstances are covered under your policy, find out if family members are covered, if there are any exemptions or limitations, and find out if you have a deductible, for example, and if you can afford to pay that deductible. And also, if you see discrepancies or don't feel that your coverage is enough, you can always do a top-up with an individual plan. Speaking specifically to these airlines that are now offering coverage for COVID-19 alongside their travel packages, so Air Canada, WestJet, Sunwing, Flight Center, they're all offering COVID-19 medical coverage for free. So obviously they're trying to entice people to travel and to make up some of those losses that they've incurred through the year. Please understand that, one, the coverage for COVID-19 could be quite low. So if you are traveling to the US, you may not be covered for all of the medical expenses that are incurred because of obviously the high prices for medical care. So make sure you understand how much you're covered for and you're aware that you may have to pay on top for those medical expenses. So I just pulled from one of the insurers online what they're saying about travel insurance right now and trip interruption coverage. So what if I have travel medical insurance and I'm traveling to countries affected by COVID-19? Your certificate of insurance has specific exclusions related to emergency travel medical insurance. If you are traveling to a country or region that Canadians have been instructed to avoid all non-essential travel to. That's every country in the world. That means that while this non-essential travel advisory remains in place, you will not be covered for any claim if you contract the coronavirus. So if you read between the lines, you're not covered for COVID-19, but you're covered possibly for other emergency travel issues that arise. Same with trip cancellation. Given the official global travel advisory, Canadians have been instructed to avoid all non-essential travel. This means that you are not eligible for trip cancellation coverage if you book a trip or purchase a trip again after this non-essential travel advisory. So speaking specifically again to the fine print of your policy, regardless of where you are going, your condition may not be covered if you are sick before you leave. So there are a couple clauses that are in effect on travel insurance policies. One of them being the pre-existing condition clause, meaning if you leave and you are sick, you may not be covered because you are aware that you are sick. And there's also a stability clause, meaning that a lot of insurers require that if you have a pre-existing medical condition, it must be stable for a specific period of time prior to applying for insurance. It's usually 90, 120, or 180 days, depending on the policy. Conditions that have not been stable for the requested period are excluded from coverage. And again, the pre-existing condition clause, you cannot leave Canada with COVID-19. If you have COVID-19 or if you become unexpectedly ill on the day of your trip, please consider or please cancel your trip because you will not be covered. And again, after reading the fine print, take into consideration medical facilities may not be open during this time, or they'll be open, but there may not be space. They may be overwhelmed. Often there's a preference for giving beds to residents. Understand your coverage maximums, and you must quarantine for 14 days upon re-entry into Canada. Check how long you're covered for. Is it 2 weeks or is it 90 days? Check the age that you're covered until. Does your coverage end at age 65, and will you be away during that time when it's your birthday? Check if only essential business travel is covered, because there are some insurers that are only traveling essential business coverage right now. Only covering essential business travel, excuse me. And check if you have to register your trip with the government of Canada. So there's a lot that you have to look into. Make sure that you know what your insurance carrier is requesting and what the fine print is of your policy. Okay. So if you are concerned that your group insurance policy doesn't cover your needs, you can always buy additional coverage tailored to suit your situation. So I'm going to pass it over now to Jonathan, and he's going to speak to us about COVID-19 and Manulife's offering.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bren. Thank you so much for the detailed information. And also thank you for giving me this amazing opportunity for me to come onto this webinar and answer some questions around what Manulife has to offer on the individual travel insurance side of the business. So like Bren said, my name is Jonathan, and I am the GTA Affinity Wholesaler here at Manulife. And one of our main product is the travel insurance. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, we are at war. Right now, there is a global pandemic going on, and everyone is battling that to the best of our efforts. Therefore, it is very important for everyone to have the weapons that you need in order to protect yourself against these unforeseen emergency medical situations, so that you don't bankrupt your wallet in the event that you contract this widely spread virus. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with some product highlights in regards to what our individual travel insurance covers at the moment. So we now have a COVID-19 pandemic travel plan. So if you do need to travel to the States or anywhere outside of Canada, we do have a plan that covers your needs to protect yourself against COVID-19. So this product can be purchased as a standalone, which means that if you don't have any coverages, you can just purchase this one and that will cover your emergency medical needs. Or like Brain mentioned, if you do have group insurance already, if you want to top up your existing coverage by adding more coverage limits and extend the duration of the trip, you can also purchase this product as well. There are two main components to this COVID-19 coverage. The first component is 5 million emergency medical coverage for conditions unrelated to COVID-19. So these coverage items includes events such as physical injuries, illnesses unrelated to COVID-19, or for example, car accidents, these physical events that's not related to any illnesses. Okay. And then separately, we also have $1 million coverage for expenses related to COVID-19. Okay, so that's on top of the $5 million coverage for non-COVID-19 coverage. So this $1 million coverage will cover you for hospital expenses. If you are put on a ventilator at the hospital, this will also cover that. So for basically treatments related to COVID-19 and hospital expenses related to that as well, that will fall under the $1 million coverage. Other than emergency medical coverage, we also have trip interruption benefits as well. So for example, if there are unexpected quarantine situations, we will cover the meals and hotel expenses due to this unexpected quarantine. We also cover expenses related to government advisory escalations. Okay, if the COVID-19 situation worsens at the destination country, we will pay for the unexpected expenses and a flight back to Canada. Okay. Other than that, we also have automatic extensions in the event that your return to Canada is delayed beyond your control due to hospitalizations or quarantine delays. Okay, so these are the main coverage highlights under our individual coverage. So for me personally, I'm always curious about what other people are thinking about in terms of traveling outside of Canada during this pandemic. Okay, so here I have some interesting stats that I want to share with everybody. Based on the survey that was conducted in September 2020, more than half of the Canadians say that they're considering taking a vacation within the next year or so. And the popular destinations are the tropical destinations, South America, Florida, the Caribbean, etc., etc. And specifically for Canadians, there was a National Post article saying that Canada's diehard snowbirds plan to spend the winter in the US no matter what happens. Okay, and an estimated 300,000 to 375,000 snowbirds are thinking about traveling this year. In terms of the destinations in US, the popular destination includes Florida, Arizona, and California. Okay, so the places down south where it's warm and where it's nice. That's where the snowbirds wants to go. And then just shifting the stats to the expenses related to COVID-19. So in the States, the average cost of the intensive care unit in the US is $9,000 a day. That's US dollars, by the way. And the average estimated cost of a ventilator, using a ventilator in the US, is roughly $2,800 a day for the use of a ventilator. Okay, so everybody can see that there is a huge demand for travel right now, despite the fact that there's a pandemic going on. People still want to get outside of Canada and go somewhere warm. And just in terms of the cost, if you do contract the COVID-19 virus, the costs are very, very high. So therefore, it is important to get the coverage you need prior to leaving for the trip. So like Brain mentioned, group insurance does have coverages for COVID-19 as well. All right, so I will take a couple minutes to compare and contrast the differences between group insurance and individual insurance. So in terms of emergency medical coverage with Manulife, it is pretty standard for both areas. So we will cover hospital expenses, medications, and transportation expenses such as air ambulance or ground ambulance. Okay, so for these areas, it is pretty similar among these two coverages. And in terms of trip interruption coverage, so this is for if something happens at the destination, something that happens that will interrupt your trip. So if you're experiencing an emergency medical situation, which you're forced to quarantine, group insurance and individual insurance will both cover it. However, the differences are, what if you are not experiencing emergency medical situation, such as you don't have COVID-19 personally, but you're forced to quarantine anyways because let's just say your family gets COVID-19, right? In this situation, group insurance may not cover that for the unexpected costs for hotels and meals. However, individual insurance will cover that. Okay. On top of that, we also have coverage for flights and unexpected expenses to return back to Canada if there is a travel advisory escalation. Right. So right now, let's take the US for example. The US right now have a level 3 travel advisory, which says avoid all non-essential travel. But if you're in the US and then the COVID cases skyrockets and the Canadian government decides to escalate that travel advisory to the highest possible advisory level, which is avoid all travel, in that event, if you decide to come back to Canada, we will cover the one-way flight back here. Okay, so that's included in your trip interruption coverage as well. In terms of trip cancellation coverage, like Brain mentioned earlier, there are restrictions around that because of the fact that since March, Manulife has declared COVID-19 as a known event from an insurance company's perspective. So therefore, for trips booked after March, if the cancellation reason is due to COVID-19, we will not cover the refunds of the coverages that's normally provided under that. Okay. With that being said, the cancellation exclusion is only restricted to COVID-19. So therefore, if you do have trip cancellation coverage, but the reason of the cancellation is not due to COVID-19, that will still be covered. And then lastly, both plans have automatic extensions, which in a sense that if you are hospitalized on the date of the policy expiry, we will automatically extend the coverage for X number of days until you are fully recovered, or if the emergency is stabilized and you're well enough to return back to Canada for continued treatments. And other cover events includes unexpected quarantine. If you're not in the hospital, but you have a quarantine until the 14-day period is up to return back to Canada, we will also extend the policy with free of charge. And then lastly, we also cover carrier delays as well. So it is a very common question that are being asked, that is credit card coverage really enough? Right? So a lot of people do not purchase individual insurance, or they don't think that they need group travel insurance because they think their credit card coverage is enough. So I'll take a couple minutes to compare and contrast what the limitations are for credit card coverage comparing to supplementary insurance coverage with group or individual. The first thing I want to discuss about is pre-existing conditions. So pre-existing conditions means health conditions prior to the start of your trip. Some common examples would be high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart conditions. So for credit card coverage, if you have these conditions prior to the start of your trip, and an emergency happens while you're on the trip that is triggered by these pre-existing conditions, the credit card company may not cover that. There are many credit card companies have the limitation built into their coverage saying that we do not cover pre-existing conditions. However, on the flip side of the coin, individual insurance and group insurance does cover emergencies arising from stabilized pre-existing conditions. So it's very, very important to check the fine prints of the credit card coverage that you have. Second thing, trip interruption and cancellation coverage. For most credit card companies, they set a limit in terms of how much they will cover for trip interruption and trip cancellation coverage. And in many situations, the coverages provided by them is not as nearly as enough as what you would need. On the individual side, for example, our trip interruption and cancellation coverage can be set that's customized to what specifically, what amount specifically you have spent on the trip, right? So therefore, with individual insurance, within supplementary insurance, you will get the coverage you need without spending most of the money out of the pocket in the event of an interruption and cancellation. Next item, we have coverage limitations. So for credit card companies, they set limits on coverages such as medications, hospital treatments, et cetera, et cetera. For example, for daily medications, the credit card companies tend to set an amount on the number of days to cover the medications for. For example, 7 days, 14 days. However, with individual or group travel insurance, we don't have limits like that. Okay, so for example, hospitalization, we cover the hospitalization expenses, up until the point where you're stabilized, or up to the policy limit, which can be 5 million or 10 million. There's really no number of days amount set in the coverages. Okay, so on the group insurance side and individual side, the coverages are more comprehensive in that case. Lastly, travel assistance. If you're not feeling well on the trip, you have to see a doctor and you want to talk to someone about which hospital is the nearest to, you would have to call a travel assistance center to get assistance from them in order to see what the next steps are. Credit card companies do not have the best service in that regard. Okay, some companies don't even have 24-hour travel assistance. Okay, however, with group benefits and individual travel insurance benefits, we have 24-hour assistance centers, which are very responsive and very, very helpful. And our travel assistance centers will let the client know exactly where to go for the treatments and how the claims reimbursement process works. So in a nutshell, credit card companies, they are not in the business to do travel insurance. The travel insurance is offered by them as a perk to their clients. However, they're not catered for this special service. So therefore, it is very important for everybody to check the fine prints of your credit card coverage prior to leaving for the trip. And if you don't think the coverage is enough, you should speak to an advisor and then look into the options of getting a private travel insurance plan. Oh, back to you, Brent.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. It was so thorough and comprehensive. So now we open up the floor to anyone who may have a question about travel and COVID-19. There is a chat box, as you can send a message to the chat, or alternatively, if you're joining us by phone, you can send an email, brynb@maximusrose.com. That's on the screen, maximusrlse.com. We'll just give a few moments to see if any questions come in. And just a note, if you're looking to purchase one of these individual policies through Manulife, Maximus Rose also provides individual coverage, not just group benefits. So please feel free to reach out to either your benefits consultant or to me, and I'll help out with directing you to the policies. Oops. Yeah. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in. I can give it another 30 seconds or so. Absolutely, if you have any further questions, you can also just send an email and we can answer afterwards. Again, that's brynb@maximusrose.com. Sorry, I should have put it on the screen, but I completely forgot. Thank you, Celeste. Okay. Well, with that, then I guess, Jonathan, we should sign off and say goodbye.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks everybody for your time this morning. If you have any questions, like Bryn said, feel free to reach out to your advisors, and yeah, we will help you out and make sure you have the coverage you need prior to your trip.
So, thanks, Jonathan. It was a pleasure to have you and have you explain everything so well. And we'll be in touch.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Ben. Thanks,
Have a great
everybody.
day,
Have a good day.
everyone.